not safe here. Your government lies to you every day. Poor soldier. They will give you a medal, GI, but only after you are dead.
I am going to say the N-word.
안녕, 나는 총무부장이야.
Wait, what do you mean the last video is blocked in Japan?
우리 동아리 실세는 바로
Whatever.
And it don't matter. None of this matters.
Because people in Japan already friggin' know about Seikimatsu. I was doing that video for like people in all these
I think I'll use my credit card. Do you guys have anything non-dairy? Anything gluten-free?
round eye countries that probably don't know about Seikimatsu. And that's probably gonna happen again this week. Cause these guys we're about to talk about were totes signed to Sony back in the day. And Sony of Japan does not play around with copyright shit. They're just gonna block it over there. But once again, it doesn't matter because this band's huge over there. Just people over here don't necessarily know about them. And that, of course, is X Japan, who used to just be called X.
우리 친구 아이가.
That's right. There was another band from the U.S. called X that played some kind of like punk rock or something. Very similar situation to how like there's Death that everybody knows. And obviously that stuff's fucking awesome, but then way after Chuck Schuldiner dies, some band that nobody's ever heard of played some kind of punk music back in the 70s, supposedly says, actually, we're the original Death. I mean, the punk band named X is probably a little bit more well-known than the punk band named Death, but that's why it's X Japan and not X, even though I still tend to like interchangeably call them X Japan or X. So there's that story, but to get back into where these guys came from, we got to talk about general history of Japanese heavy metal. So my gateway into like Japanese metal and stuff was through way more extreme shit like intestine Baalism and Psy. Like I'm like a death metal and black metal guy. That's what I got into music with basically when I was pretty young. But Japanese heavy metal stuff goes way back further than that, well into like the late 70s, early 80s. You get stuff like Loudness, who are great, of course. Probably the most well-known Japanese heavy metal band. Loudness right there. Great guitar playing in that. Then you get into shit like Anthem, which is a little bit more towards the thrash and power metal end of the spectrum. I've been getting into them a little bit more recently. I gotta say, pretty stellar discography. I might do an episode on those guys someday. Good stuff. And more underground, but still very heavy metal type shit like Crowley, who played a very occult-sounding sort of weird doom metal thing. Actually somewhat comparable to the more gloomy moments of the first Seikimatsu album. But that's where Japanese metal starts. If you want to go even crazier, you can go back to friggin' Flower Traveling Band and Bow Wow. But then something happened, and that something was called Visual K. Or K. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Shameful display! A shameful display!
I think it's just Visual K, which stands for visual style, because bands playing in this, they were from a wide variety of genres, everything from like synth pop over to pretty fucking heavy shit. But a lot of it was based in metal. Most of the original bands were fairly metallic sounding, and it left a pretty big impact on kind of metal over in Japan and even like across the world. And when I say some of these bands were definitely metal, like you look at something like Duran Gray and this shit sounded like straight death metal. I mean, it's really weird death metal. Weird fucking vocals. But there's quite a bit of Morbid Angel to this shit. And then it goes into stuff like this. These guys, this particular band was all about weird genre mashing. There's a lot of prog rock going on in addition to the late metal influences. These guys are actually one of the biggest Visual K bands out there. And that stuff's pretty good. So you got Visual K bands that are dabbling in metal, and then you get metal bands moving into Visual K territory with the case of bands like Bloodstained Child, who are a melodic death metal band that started slowly incorporating more and more kind of J-pop elements. A lot of weird dance music shit going on. And of course heavily neoclassical with all the keyboards. I like this album a lot in particular. This is their third one. It's called Epsilon. I mean, all their stuff's pretty decent though. But yeah, Visual K stands for Visual Style. because these bands were all about having a very shocking visual presence. And that starts with X Japan, the first Visual K band. It actually comes, like the whole Visual K thing, that name comes from their initial slogan, which was psychedelic violence crime of visual shock. And they certainly have a very shocking visual presence, X Japan, even more so than Sekimatsu. Like, if you look at photos of them in the 80s, they had tons of spikes, something in between like proto-corpse paint and like kabuki theater makeup, really outlandish, somewhat androgynous outfits. But their music was also very shocking because they kind of independently developed power metal. Back before power metal existed, there is quite a bit of overlap between like how Halloween sounds and how X Japan sounds, and I don't think either band was aware of the other. But X Japan came up with something that sounded quite a bit like German power metal by mixing melodic metal like early Iron Maiden and such. We're talking like 1982, and then adding to it a lot of their punk influences, particularly the main songwriter Yoshiki was big into like GBH and Discharge and such, so fast repetitive drum beats and a heightened level of aggression. You add that to Iron Maiden, and you screw around with it a bit. Eventually you get something that sounds a whole lot like power metal. But it's not just this like kind of power metal thing they do. There's also a lot of orchestral influence. Yoshiki, he's a drummer, and when you have a drummer writing all your stuff, it can go either really well or really bad. In this case, it went very well because the way he looks at drums, it's like each different drum or cymbal or whatever is kind of a different instrument. And he was also a pianist. Excuse me, is there something funny to you about the word pianist? Okay, fine, he's a piano player, whatever. But that means this dude's gonna have an interesting way of looking at music, very orchestral. He's big on how all of these like interlocking parts fit together as a whole. Big on layers of sound. And so there's a potent classical music strain running through X Japan's music that makes them very interesting sounding. If I were to typify X Japan, like what's the ultimate X Japan song that shows off kind of everything they do, I would say it's the song Silent Jealousy off of their third album, Jealousy. Starts out with this soft piano thing that I have left included because it's pretty important to the overall composition of the song. Over the course of it, they take elements of the melody being played here and kind of like do different shades of them with the different instruments, including the vocals. Interesting stuff, as you're about to find out. Heavy guitars, of course. Yoshiki doing lots of cool fills. Guitarist Hide, really cool guitarist. I love this riff, how it incorporates this kind of like weird bar chord slide in the middle of it. And of course, like the heavy palm muting is always good. And here we go. There's that piano melody now interpreted through the lens of a pretty cool new wave of British heavy metal style harmony. And some nasty, almost death metal level drumming from Yoshiki with the double bass and whatnot. Intense stuff, my dude. Toshi's vocals are a bit of an acquired taste. I like them. They're very emotional. They're also kind of punkish and bratty at times, but very like overwrought at others. Often very stately. There's a lot of conflicting stuff going on in them. And this melody, the vocal melody right here, is echoing that piano thing from earlier. But they've brought in new orchestral layers in the background with some strings. Got a weird jangly clean guitar buried in the mix in the background, kind of hitting out the root chords of each of these riffs. This is what I mean about layers of sound. They've been running with this chorus for a bit, but it doesn't seem overlong or boring because they keep doing different stuff with it. They've pulled out a lot of the guitars at this point and brought in the orchestra a bit heavier, even changed up the tempo of it. Speed up, slow down type shit. Cool stuff. Back into the main riff from earlier. Nice little orchestral accent there. Like that a lot. He also does spooky narration, much like
Demon Kogura from Sekimatsu. This part's cool because it shows off the bass playing from Pata. It's pretty good as well. But you can tell they're building up to some more heavy shit. Emotionally heavy, that is. Check out this piano, my guy. And so we've brought back the piano from earlier, but it's being played at a more kind of heavy-handed manner now that we've reached an angrier portion of the song. Maybe not angrier, just more intense. Less Debussy and more, I don't know, Prokofiev or something. This part here is cool. It's like weird trade-off between the guitars and the pianos. Lots and lots and lots of scales. Mozart would like it. And there we go. Dank solos, as always. Thank you, Hide. But I think that kind of gives you a good overview of what X Japan is about. That song right there, because it shows off their kind of like more ballad tendencies. They do a lot of ballads, a lot of piano type shit, but it also shows how they're definitely playing some pretty heavy melodic speed metal type stuff. Their first album, Vanishing Vision, came out way back in the mid-'80s, and it has a psychedelic crime of visual violence or whatever type cover, because it looks like something out of a Giallo movie. They've cut the X into someone's chest. There's like the black gloves, very Profundo Rosso looking. And much like Sekimatsu, these guys came out of the gate swinging. Harsh, thrashy, lo-fi, violent speed metal. Maybe in keeping with the times, except for how intense the drum performance is. That kind of elevates it above the rank and file of bands playing this type of music in the mid-'80s. And the guitar playing, of course, is excellent. Catchy riffs, all that kind of stuff. But as we get further into the album,
ambulance, please.
we get into the weirder stuff. The more uniquely X-Japan stuff. Like this weird bendy riff. Actually, this sounds a little bit like Sekimatsu. They're going to start incorporating some weird clean guitar shit here. Watch this. This is like 80s goth rock or something, but with like this Iron Maiden gallop under it. Very interesting sound. That was some weird jangly shit. Weird jangly shit is kind of Hide's bread and butter. That's a big part of his sound between that and the very consonant soaring melodies. And then we get to, that album's independent. They get signed to a major label. They put out the career-defining album Blue Blood. This song right here is called X, so it's sort of a defining song for the band. There's that weird jangly shit from Hide again, coupled with the very fill-heavy performance from Yoshiki. This is a great song, and you should probably listen to it, which is what you're doing right now. Thank you for doing that. But yeah, no, power metal's still going there, and it's still pretty aggressive despite not having the lo-fi charm of that initial offering from them.
Dank.
There's the punk influence. Got these like snotty fill-in vocals between gang shouts where they yell the band's name. I think this album is kind of where he wins me over with his vocal styles. Because I dig them, despite them being rather unorthodox for this kind of power metal, that slightly harsher tone that he has. Another great song on this album is the wonderfully titled Orgasm. Hope you like guitar solos, because we got a whole lot of them on this track, and it's pretty fucking short, too, for the amount of solos it has. I think this is under 3 minutes long, this song. But it's got a fuck ton of guitar solos. And some great drumming, of course. Guitars and drumming, big selling points for this band. Vocals here are awesome. There's that punk influence again. There's like overlapping shouts leading into a gang shout. There's clattering drums. Very well produced for how chaotic it is. Nasty ending. And then we get to their third album, Jealousy. We already went over that. But if you're going to start out with an X Japan album, probably get like Blue Blood or Jealousy. Those are both pretty good ones. Then we get into the album that actually got me into X Japan, because I'm kind of a nerd, and I saw that there was this metal band. I was reading like Wikipedia or something freaking back when I was like 16. There was this metal band from Japan that did a half-hour long speed metal song. I'm like, how do you even do that? Well, lyrically, this song's a bit of a Hillingstadt testament. What the hell does that mean? Well, there's this Beethoven guy back in the day. He's a great composer. He realized he was going deaf, and he was considering killing himself because it's kind of hard to compose if you can't hear anything. And then he wrote this thing when he was in Hillingstadt called the Hillingstadt Testament, wherein he kind of talks himself out of committing suicide. It's very Faustian, very Nietzschean. This half-hour long album where it's all one song, very similar lyrical concept, probably even influenced by the Hillingstadt Testament given Yoshiki's classical music priors. It's got a full orchestra. They were doing the full orchestra thing way before S&M with Metallica, and they were doing the whole album one song thing before pretty much everybody. This is certainly before Crimson and such. Depending on where you start this album, you could be forgiven for thinking that it's a whole lot of very Queen-esque fluff. But that's just kind of part of what's going on here. Because not only is this emotionally pretty heavy stuff, but musically, it moves into some darn heavy territory. Like this. Very interesting stop-start type stuff. And you can see his orchestral priors, Yoshiki, with how he writes. We transition into the next section here. Very much a heavily layered sound. This whole album is pretty good, and it's kind of hard to condense 30 minutes of music where pretty much every element is darn important into like a minute-long sample. So I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to play you some cool shit that happened. Hopefully I've succeeded in doing so, because I think this part's pretty dank. But yeah, that album, I won't say it's perfect. Like, there's a piano bit in the middle where it starts out melodic, and then it's supposed to simulate, like, the process of gradual brain erosion through insanity, and it gets, like, more and more dissonant to where it's just a bunch of noise, and then it kind of gloriously gets woven back into being a very musical kind of power metal thing, which sounds decent on paper. In execution, I like it, but I could see why someone might find it tiresome. I mean, even with like the best like one-song albums, like Edge of Sanity with their Crimson shit, for every great moment like this, you get a not so great part like this. Sorry, I know you hate that part. I just had to make a point there. But yeah, now it's the 90s. Oh, shit. If you're a weird orchestral power metal band, what the hell are you gonna do? Well, locally, Japan wasn't full of flannel-clad, depressive shitheads like the US was, so while they did start to experiment with their sound, they managed to keep it real. Real weird. The Dahlia album incorporates a lot of interesting digital sounds, a lot of like death rock, goth, Samhain type shit, a lot of industrial stuff, very aggressive approach, abrasive guitar sounds, definitely not grunge. They're actually they were doing a Cynic thing with the drum set here. They started adding electronic components to an acoustic kit, much like Cynic did on Focus. And remember that wacky jangly shit Hide used to do? That's like this whole album is wacky jangly shit. That and very heartfelt ballads. But I'm not going to play you one of those because this is supposed to be a metal show, goddammit. Rest assured they're also pretty good. But that's the final X-Japan album. After that, they broke up. They did solo projects. Hide's first album, which was called Hide Your Face, you see what he did there? It was very much in the vein of Dahlia. And then Hide possibly killed himself. It's kind of tricky. because he might have hanged himself. According to the Japanese police, that's what happened. He killed himself. According to the band, it was an accident during some like weird sort of back pain therapy thing he was doing, but they might have just said that because X Japan's fan base is fucking nuts, like very respectable level of devotion to the band, but also that means when somebody possibly kills themselves, you might get copycat suicides. So their official position is that he didn't kill himself, but he's gone. X Japan does do occasional reunion tours, and they'll even use like recordings of Hide's solos. That's how much respect they have for him. They don't want anybody else to play that shit. That's the X Japan experience. Introduction into Visual K. Introducing addition to the heavy metal universe, I would say. Good stuff. Hope you like it, and I'll see you next week.
Right, and I'll bring all my shoes and my glasses with me. So I have them.